going on, Shield Brothers and Shield Maidens? This is True for Shield's Rest, and today I want to talk about some of the changes that occurred from the 1.5 open beta to the official rules here in Daggerheart. So let's get into it. Alright, so the reason why I want to talk about this today is because I find it interesting to see what some of those changes are from the 1.5 open beta to what is currently the official rules for Daggerheart. I think it's kind of interesting to see what those changes were, and maybe we can even reason why they did what they did, why they changed what they changed, regardless of whether we agree with it or not. Just why could it have possibly happened this way? What were they trying to go for? What was the shift? I think we can kind of look at that and really understand a little bit more with the direction that they're trying to go with this game, or at least the things that they're going to try and do with the official rules, and see if that ends up working out. So that's why we want to talk about that today. But more specifically, we want to get into the Ancestries and the Communities and see what those changes were. So let's start off with the Ancestries, because the Ancestries had more changes than I was honestly expecting, and I think they're kind of interesting in what changes did occur. Now, I don't agree with all of these changes, but there are some that I do definitely agree with, which I'm perfectly okay with. Some of them, though, I was like, really? That's the change we're making? But in either case, that doesn't matter. Like I said, we want to look at what these changes are so we can understand the direction the game is actually going to be going, especially for future reasons. Okay, so let's start off with the Dracona, because with the Clank, there was no change. Clank had no change, and actually a lot of the changes that did occur within these cards are actually more verbiage than anything else. So just the way that they were saying something, but for the most part the intent stayed the same, and the mechanical side of things stayed the same. So you're really not missing out, it's just they tried to say it in a better way. It's really all it is. So it's just some verbiage changes. So Dracona. Dracona didn't make a whole lot of sense to me with the change that they made. So the Elemental Breath stays the same. No change with the Elemental Breath, they just slightly changed the verbiage, nothing more. However, with Scales, they did actually do a huge change with this one, and it's not one that I necessarily agree with at all, but changes are changes, you just grow with it, you just get used to it, and that's really all it is here. So it used to be, in 1.5 anyways, the Scales gave you a +1 to your damage threshold. So it just gave you a +1 to whatever your damage threshold is currently. That's all it really is. It wasn't a huge deal. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't anything crazy, but it wasn't nothing. Like, it was at least something. Sometimes that one can be worth something. I actually thought that they would increase it to, like, +2 instead, but that's just me. However, what they changed it to was whenever you would take severe damage, instead of marking all 3 hit points, you can spend a stress to mark 1 fewer. In other words, you're only marking 2 if you spend the stress. The reason why I don't agree with this is because the +1 was at least semi-beneficial, saying that your scales have some form or fashion of an impact on your armor. This is saying, well, they do when you want them to, as long as you have the stress to use it. I don't agree with that bit because, let's face it, it's a passive thing that's just inherent to Draconas anyways, right? So what would be the point of taking away that nice little passive of here's a +1, Why do I have to spend a stress to use my natural defenses? That's the only reason why I disagree with that, is the stress expenditure, but you'll actually see throughout these changes, stress is the thing that they're going towards. They're bringing in a lot more stress-related features, and sometimes it makes sense, and other times it really doesn't. And in this particular sense, it does not make any sense at all, to me anyways. My humble opinion, like I said, just one man, but I'm not a huge fan of this particular change. Now for Dwarf. The Dwarf thick skin was already kind of interesting in and of itself, and it was a gamble to begin with. Mainly because what it was is basically whenever you would take minor damage, you could roll a d6, and on a 5+, you would then be able to negate that damage completely. Here, in the new official rules here, it basically went to whenever you take that minor damage, you can basically spend 2 stress instead of marking a hit point. Again, not one that I'm a fan of, but I mean, it makes sense. It does make sense. It's just I don't enjoy the 2 stress expenditure just to completely negate 1 whole hit point. Like, I get that it should have a cost, but I don't know. I like the roll a d6 and hopefully it works out, but at the same time, I would prefer this to be 1 stress at that point, so that way it's not as huge of an expenditure, because you're starting to see as we go here that these stress expenditures are going to stack up to the point where you're always stressed out as a character, you know? And I don't know if I'm a huge fan of that quite yet. I still, like, the jury's still out on that one. I still have to, like, get my mind together on whether I'm okay with that or not, as far as the amount of stress that you're going to be using. I get it in some of the class builds because that's kind of what they're about. However, if you start tacking on too much, then your players aren't going to be able to do anything, and especially things that are inherent to their character to begin with, much like the ancestry and even the community. So, now with the elf and the fairy, they made no changes at all besides verbiage, like I said. That, again, all this is verbiage. All of it's verbiage. But for the most part, they made no real change here with elf and fairy, so that was easy. But fawn, on the other hand, they made one particular change that I was glad to see. It was definitely a needed change to basically specify what we're talking about here. So with the kick. So the kick is basically the same all the way through, except in the original and the 1.5 open beta verbiage, they didn't specify the range in which you could kick back from, or you could kick somebody to. It specified no range at all. In this one, they just specify very close range, and that is literally it. The other change was just a title change from Leap to Caprine Leap, and that was literally it for the fawn, so not bad. Now for the Furbolg and the Fungrel, there was no real change for either one of them besides the Furbolg getting a few title changes here. Instead of it being Unshakable, it went to Natural Calm. Otherwise, there was no change at all for the Furbolg. Fungrel, same thing, no change at all, not even title changes, so that was really easy. Now, Galapa, on the other hand, had the most changes, mainly because of the way that it was written in 1.5 open beta. You knew that those changes were going to be a lot going into the official rules, just because they teased a lot of the things in the official rules that were going to be the main changes, and you could tell just a mile away that Galapa was changing hardcore. So, starting off with the Shell of Protection. The way it was written was it was basically your proficiency score going into your armor score. So if you had 3 proficiency, you're gaining a +3 to your armor score. Now, the way that it's written, it's changed to being into your thresholds, which I like a lot, mainly because there's no armor score anymore, so you don't really, it's not going to work, right? However, it going into your thresholds is a lot better, like way better. And this is one of the changes I was kind of hoping for the scales for the Dracona, that they were just going to add it into their thresholds and just increase it a little bit, because you have, Dracona scales, like that makes sense. Much like it makes sense for the shell to be that Shell of Protection. So it goes into your thresholds, great change, love that to death. Now for the other feature, for what used to be Slow and Steady, that has been completely nixed, and now we have Retract. And Retract, I like it and I don't at the same time. Like I don't know how often I'd actually use this as a player in particular, mainly because what it went to is now basically you have resistance to all physical damage, and then you also have disadvantage on all action rolls because you're retracted into your shell, so of course you're not going to be able to do a whole lot. On top of that, though, you now cannot move because obviously you are retracted into your shell. So all those things make sense. How often you're going to use this or not is something else entirely. I'd be actually kind of curious to hear some of those cool moments in which you do use this. But I feel like this is going to be one of those features that kind of goes to the wayside and gets forgotten about, if I'm being honest. Now, for the next, 5 ancestries here, there were no changes. So for Giant, Goblin, Halfling, Human, and Infernus, there were no changes at all whatsoever besides verbiage. And then for the Halfling, they just changed the titles for their features, but otherwise it's the same thing all the way through. So from Youthful Spirit to Luckbringer, and then from Little Luck to Internal Compass. So that was basically it, but they all still do the exact same thing. So now with Katari did end up getting one particular change, and that was in their Feline Instincts. This basically allowed you to mark a stress to reroll your hope dice. It now still allows you to do the same thing, except you're going to spend 2 hope to reroll your hope dice instead of marking the stress. The only change. Now, Orc did get a good change, I think. I do like what they moved this into. I wish they renamed it to be something else, but Sturdy went from being when you're at 1 hit point, you basically had your armor score doubled. So you can use your armor and it's going to count double than what it was before. Love that. No problems with that. I did like what they went into, though, where basically now when you're at 1 hit point, all attacks against you have disadvantage. Again, I would have just gone with a different title change. If you're going to be going through and doing title changes for pretty much every other ancestry out there, why not do it for this one where it makes a little bit more sense than sturdy? I don't know, like battle senses or I don't know, whatever. Just something to that effect. But hey, and then Ribbit and Simia, no changes at all whatsoever. Now getting into the communities had basically no change across the board. There was only 2 that did. One of them I was actually kind of heartbroken by because I'm a huge Ridgeborn fan. And then the other one just kind of made sense. So with Orderborn, we'll start off with Orderborn. Like I said, none of the other ones had any changes. Just Orderborn and Ridgeborn had the changes. With Orderborn, it was just a quick, simple one, much like with the Fawn, where they just specified range. Here in Orderborn, they just specified a little bit further that it's just once per rest, rather than saying once per short rest, which is what it used to be. Obviously, any rest you're taking is going to be a rest, and it could be considered a short rest, so why specify short rest? Good change. Ridgeborn, on the other hand, basically did not change except for one part that I was absolutely in love with, but I understand why they made the change. This one I wasn't upset about. Like, I was a little annoyed, but now I'm just not going to be picking Ridgeborn for this particular reason, and that is because they've taken away the armor slot that you gain at character creation. So that's what it used to be in the 1.5 open beta, and now in the official rules, they've changed it to where that's just gone. You still have all the other benefits of Ridgeborn, that's the only change. Now, with that particular thing, I was hoping to see Seaborn change at that point, because Seaborn is a bit overpowered. Because I see where they were going with this. They were trying to get rid of a lot of those big benefits that you gain from your community, because, let's face it, as a Guardian, what's your go-to? Ridgeborn. As any possible frontliner, what's your go-to? Ridgeborn. Because you're going to get that armor slot of character creation. Of course you're going to take that. Are you kidding me? So I get why they removed it. I wish they would do the same for Seaborn and rework that a little bit to something that makes a little more sense for the Seaborn side of things. This is just an overpowered community, and it's going to stay that way until they do some sort of errata or whatever, So outside of that, though, no changes besides verbiage. Nothing too bad. Do like a good portion of these changes. There's still a few that just, they get to me, but that's okay. It's okay. You just get used to the new, and that's fine. It's all right. But those were the changes for the Ancestries and the Communities. I'm going to be going through and looking at all the other changes and bringing those to you. So if you are interested in this, let me know down in the comments. If you did not find this interesting or worthwhile at all whatsoever, again, please let me know. Because if I don't need to waste my time doing this, even better. If there's something more particular you'd like to see, let me know, because then I can start shifting time towards that. And I would love to get into the things that you all want to know about for Daggerheart, because we are going to be covering more of the adversaries, environments, things that we're building in-house, things that we're bringing over from other tabletop RPGs in the Cross Shield series. So we've got a lot going on. So if there's anything in particular you do want, let us know, so that way I can use my time way more wisely. So if you are new to the channel, we are a group of friends and military members that absolutely love tabletop RPGs. And we believe that no matter what system you are into, you should have enough content to be able to have an epic game night every night. So if you are interested in Daggerheart, DC-20, Lancer, D&D, Genesis system, whatever you're into, we're going to be bringing it to you here on the channel. So consider subscribing and hitting that bell notification so you don't miss a single video. And until the next one, keep that shield wall strong.